I'm Bryce Butler from Access Ventures, and this is More Than Profit, a show where I talk with founders, investors, entrepreneurs, and leaders of all kinds about living and working with purpose, how they do it, and why. Welcome back to More Than Profit. We are in the studio today, and it's fun. We're sitting down, drinking some bourbon. This is the first time we're doing this, so we're opening up the year with some hot takes. What happened in 2022, what we're looking forward to in 2023. And so with me today, you might have remembered TJ Abood and Ben Terry. They've been on previous episodes of the podcast.
We're officially returning guests.
That's right. Returning guests. So, and joining them is Brian McKay, another member of our team. So excited.
Probably the most important member of the team. But yeah, thank you for having me.
So we're going to change it up a little bit, not doing any type of interview per se, but just...
We're actually talking about profit today.
Exactly. We're talking about hot takes. And the first one I'm going to kind of just throw out there is what I think everybody's experienced corporately and personally, but market turmoil and kind of its impacts on the broader landscape of capital and a lot of big questions coming up politically. So, TJ, I'm going to kick it over to you. What are your hot takes looking back at 2022 and thinking about this year and in the markets?
Give us one word answer. How would you describe the market from this past year in one word?
Chill.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I don't know about you guys. We did well.
Yeah.
This year, it's hard. Honestly, there are too many events throughout the year across, our personal portfolio, but then the broader market. How would I sum it up? I think just market indecision. So much of the activity we've seen has hinged on an outlook on inflation and what's the Fed going to do, just all driven at that macro level. But, that's guesswork at best. And if you watch, trading days when new announcements come out, there are very different minds trading this market right now.
Yeah. So let's get a little particular. So like specifically ESG. So I think that's become, interestingly enough, like this hot button issue. Like, can you give us if you can, a background of where is ESG today and what are many of the indictments or the bombs being thrown at it? I think actually from both sides of the political aisle.
Well, there's a lot out there in ESG, and the one thing that comes to mind to me, it's essentially been used for political gain. So folks point to it as government interfering with individual decisions to support or not support agenda items from Washington or the more broadly the globe.
I also know some Republicans are specifically Governor DeSantis in Florida going hard against BlackRock and their ESG strategy, predominantly because they call it activist investing. Mm-hmm. Not so much government overreach, but that this is loosey-goosey and we shouldn't be doing this. It's not good investing. It doesn't maximize shareholder value, and so therefore it's not the responsibility of companies like BlackRock to be doing ESG, and Vanguard even pulling out of some of their agreements around climate action. So,
yeah, I think everybody's entitled to a take on things. If you look at a shareholder model and you look at a longer timeline, then it is the best thing in the shareholder's interest to expand beyond the profits of today. And one of the biggest indictments of publicly traded companies is that they're too short term, because every quarter they've got to prove something to the market, and incentives are aligned in that way. This is why PE companies they'll take companies private because they really need to retool, and they need to retool without everybody sharing their opinions on how it's affecting them. And so certainly there's a lot of ESG that is undefined. What is it? What does it mean to Bryce Butler, Brian McKay, Ben Terry? So that is always something that's used. But I do think more broadly, it is an investment strategy over a longer timeline that will win out.
But do you think it is politically motivated?
Oh, for sure.
And isn't that like what Congress and them are kind of like pressing that button on, is these managers of money should be first maximizing returns, not pushing political motivations or agendas. And obviously, Sam Bankman-Fried,
Who's that?
yeah, is kind of like now bringing this even more so in the crypto side. But do you think we should be, I mean, we're in the impact space. Do you think everything we do is politically motivated? Do you think that's right? Do you think we should be focusing more on maximizing returns and those are separate? Or do you think at the end of the day, whether you're trying to maximize returns or not, it's still politically motivated or biased in some way?
Well, I don't think, when I think about us, and I'm biased, of course, but it's not politically motivated. We believe, all people matter. And so we naturally have a much larger view of who stakeholders are in these companies. And so ESG, or whatever you want to call it, fits that. Yeah. I think it's politically motivated. Some people will look at it and say the government is trying to enforce values on people that don't want it because they're pushing dollars. There's a lot of different ways they can do that. Right now, there's been a push toward doing it through kind of capitalist endeavors, but there are regulatory endeavors to do that. If the powers that be want to push alternative energy, we see that they're pushing it. They set a goal in the future, and it's a goal that's not attainable with what we have right now in alternative energy. Mm-hmm. And so that's pushing industries into how can we generate power quickly, because things are going to change in the regulatory landscape. How SBF plays into this, he plays into everything.
Yeah.
Well, if we stay on the ESG thing, to me, granted, it's not perfect. Like, it has its flaws. It's ill-defined. I do think the most defined segments of ESG are sustainability and the environment, mostly because it's quantifiable. It's easily quantifiable. Carbon sequestration, whatever that might be. But the principles of ESG, I think I personally am just shocked that it doesn't really matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat, conservative or liberal. The principles of it are to invest your values and recognize that profit at what cost, and how do we actually redefine profit? So this podcast, More Than Profit, like what do we actually mean when we say profit? Because every company has an impact, positive, negative, or neutral. So there are negative externalities, positive gains, financially and otherwise. And so I think the thing that's the most shocking and frustrating is it is not well defined. And there is work to be done in the ESG space, but to throw it out and use it as political fodder just is crazy. When it's like, at the end of the day, the goal is, if you're a Republican and you care about whatever, why are your investments not aligned with that? Or if you're a Democrat and you care about whatever, why are you not aligning your investments around?
Well, and this may be
objectives?
ignorance on my part, but to your point around investing around your values, then it really comes down to how are you assessing your asset managers or portfolio managers? How do their values and that organization's values align with your own personal ones?
Sure.
Because some of these are managing pensions,
Sure.
where you can't have your values align with the asset manager.
Sure. I mean, they're
Who is
impersonal. Like
deploying
that's
that money.
So
there is like a
there's not a
big
personhood there
Right.
with values, but there might be a corporation.
Sure.
And so I think, are they doing the work of understanding the values of their co-op or their group or their membership to say, hey, this is what we care. Oh, this is what we're about. Like, we are a teacher's pension fund. So therefore, clearly we're about education. So let's pursue things that are pro-education.
Well, if we were to plug one of our portfolio companies, this is the moment for Ethic to really take things to the next level in this time of uncertainty around ESG. It seems like they're really primed to come in to help out some of these asset managers and portfolio managers to be able to find those values and align them in the market.
Well, that's why, I mean, TJ and I love Ethic personally, just because it doesn't, one of the things that was super frustrating in the early days of AV was if you were wanting to do something with ESG, everybody had their fund. And so you were limited in scope to like, this fund does clean energy. This fund does sustainable agriculture. But there's not a way to like drill down into more specific granular looks at kind of what are those companies in those portfolios. And that's why we loved Ethic. And there are other companies out there. So yes, we're investors in Ethic and we think they're the best. But that's why you're right. This is the opportunity for those types of companies, because I don't care what your values are. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I love about it. Like, your values can be completely opposed to my values, but these platforms allow you to invest your values. Like, that's the beauty of it. And that's what I think is so silly in this political climate.
Well, and that's one of the things like that we forget because it is politicized, that there are people here making decisions. And so, you know, by happenstance, so before I came in here, I heard from an ultra high net worth family, and they were like, can we talk about investing our values? Because what we've been doing, it's frustrating. We want to make a change. That's a large family office that wants to invest in a different way. And so that's, okay, well, how many more people feel that way? And then, you know, so if you want to skate to where the puck is going, which is kind of not what's happening right now, where does the talent come from for these companies to be profitable 10 years from now? You know, we're the old people in the office here.
Whoa, speak for yourself, that guy.
Sorry, I'm the old person here.
Yeah.
But
are you?
I mean, well, Brian, but he's young in spirit.
Yeah.
That's why he hasn't spoken yet. Is he's got
He's the
all
old
the wisdom,
sage.
and he's
He's the
letting us
wisdom.
young cats kind of get at it first.
He's letting us duke it out. But, you know, you can say, well, here are these issues with these companies, ESG companies, stakeholder models. But at some point in the future, people are going to work there to make it profitable. They have to innovate or they die. That's the saying. How many 20-somethings want to work for an extractive company? No one. And so these things are going to change. There's inertia's on the side of ESG, and I think, you know, we'll see that play out over time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we could keep going on. I do think what I'd like to see, so looking forward to 2023, is instead of the movement by the hyper-political folks to just completely chuck it, like, how do we make it better? Like, it's not perfect. I don't think anybody would say ESG is defined enough. I mean, that's the thing we talk about even with our own relationships with Ethic and others. Like, environment is a little bit more defined. How do we actually better understand the social impact implications and governance implications of our portfolio? So there is a lot of work to be done, but we do need to shift gears. So I'm going to shift to the next hot take, which is what Ben kind of started to bring into it, which is, you know, this whole SBF crypto blockchain
Which
stuff.
is like the guy who is also making ESG look bad.
Very much.
So,
Well, he's one of the guys. I mean, like,
he's like
he's
right
a lightning
now,
rod.
He is he's going to be made an example of, and he's defrauded all of these investors and
Under the name of altruism.
Yep. And yeah, so he is Sam Bankman-Fried. He's
Yeah.
He's a villain in every story. Doesn't matter. You've got a story. He's the guy.
Yeah, so the two of you, Ben and TJ more specifically, like, crypto blockchain, you know, we convictionally invest in the blockchain. Our mission is to build a more inclusive and creative economy that's equitable, dynamic, and resilient. We fundamentally believe that technology in the future is the way that we're going to help more people access the economy and find freedom to maneuver within the economy. So I think that still is true, but we always have been looking at, okay, we need the SEC, we need regulation to kind of step in here and help provide clarity. So we've been looking at that internally and talking about it for a while around the coming crypto winter and what's going to happen. But right now, it's like anything. Oh, crypto sucks. Oh, the blockchain, like, it's just a bad industry. Let's just chuck it. It needs to close down and die. So let's talk about 2022. Give us some of the highlights of what's happened in the crypto space over the last year, and then what do we think's coming up for 2023? Either of you. Web3, crypto, blockchain, all that stuff.
Well, we can piggyback it. I mean, I think, man, when crypto is up, you look like a genius. You just look so good. People want to be your friends. And when it's down, people want to know. So the question is it dead? Has crypto died? In TJ, you and I had talked about just the market at large a couple of months ago of like how crypto is one of the more riskier assets that is out there. And I think it would be helpful in this conversation coming out of the ESG and overall market to kind of talk about how do risky assets play in the market. And I feel like some of that's connected to what we're seeing happen in crypto right now in terms of money moving in and out as well,
and
too.
I'd be curious, would you guys say that crypto had died before? Because I know...
That's a good question.
Yeah,
I mean, there was a massive winter several years ago where everybody was like, oh, it's dead.
Yeah.
And people kind of held on, and then it just bounced back.
Let's just say some of us were wearing Arc'teryx jackets and others were wearing sweaters during that winter. So, but yeah, I do think it's like died before and it's come back. And I think that speaks to some of like TJ's thoughts around how money moves within the market as well too. So maybe you can kind of explain that theory and like a high summary theory of like, where the risky assets move into during times like this and when do they flow back into those risky assets?
Yeah. So Brian, there's a website out there that counts the times crypto has been called dead. So I'm sorry, I'm looking at Brian, but I shouldn't. I should look at a microphone. So anyways, your answer's over there on the internet. I guess, we think of crypto as this whole other thing disconnected from every other investment we've ever made. And partially, I guess that used to be the case when it wasn't accessible and it was, pretty much Bitcoin and it was driven by a lot of ideology. But what we've seen over the last, 7 years or so is that it has become more mainstream. And you actually begin to see the benefits of the technology play out in ways that you didn't think was possible back in 2014 or whenever it was. And so over time, it went from just, your cousin at Thanksgiving telling you about it to...
The Doge.
Yeah, telling you about Doge. And I wish I had some of my brother's hot takes from Thanksgiving. So it went from that to, there was a period of time before this crash where there was not any sort of reputation risk in putting money into crypto. Pension funds were looking at it. Infrastructure.
University endowments have been in it for a little while now.
Yeah, it's become more acceptable. So when you make that jump, you're on the mainstream risk asset spectrum. And so if you look at your kind of large cap stocks, those are not as risky as your small caps. And, you look at your tech and you just keep going out on that risk curve and you get to Bitcoin and Ethereum and then way, 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 way out there, you get to Doge. Anyway, so it's working the way the markets work. And if you sat down and you actually studied it, crypto assets, they track the NASDAQ. They track the larger stock market because it's just an extension of it, just as a higher beta. That's all.
And what's interesting about that point is philosophically, crypto people want to see those not correlate with each other.
That's right.
And there's been a lot of conversation about if and when that would occur. And there's been a lot of conversation when COVID happened and some of the dollar going down and gas and all those different things, they thought finally they may unlink, but time and time it's shown that they are still very much connected, crypto and NASDAQ and all that kind of stuff. So again, we're seeing that theory still play out to this day that when the overall market is down, crypto is going to go down with it and the money's going to move one way and then it'll move back into risky assets as it rises back up.
Well,
Wouldn't
sure.
you agree?
As the market, that's exactly right. There's a lot of money in this market. It's not just, someone who's ride or die Zcash, I'm never going to sell. Mm-hmm. There's, just like anything else, when you're worried about your money, you move it into safer things. Well, there's, a couple $1 trillion market here. What do you think is going to happen? It's going to follow the exact same thing. People are going to start moving into safer assets.
Yeah.
Well, and TJ, I think the other thing too is people hear words, they confuse words. They think they understand words. So crypto versus blockchain. You know, like a lot of people talk about crypto. I think what they mean are the tokens that that they hear about: Bitcoin, Zcash, Dogecoin, Ethereum.
There's a lot of shorthand terminology that we can say crypto, and it kind of mean a lot of different things.
But I think what we, as convictional investors, that think, okay, the blockchain itself. So help really drill that down a little bit, because like I think and you could use examples like Mike Sal with Goldfinch. There was an article. So we're recording this in December, but there's an article literally released today about what one of our portfolio companies, Goldfinch, is trying to do. And fundamentally, it really, I think, gives a picture of why we as an organization moved in the direction of blockchain. And our thesis was adoption leads to greater impact, just like the internet. Like you got to get people on the internet, and then all of a sudden you can see the power of the internet. And then you start to think, okay, use cases for the internet. First thing is get people on the blockchain, like where it's more ubiquitous to how we think about life. We've talked about this on previous episodes, but I think it's worth noting right now with SBF and collapse of FTX and questions around Binance and how people think about the crypto space. But like crypto versus blockchain, like that is like I think one of the most confusing things, because people just kind of lump it all together. But it is a thing in 20.
Different blockchains.
There's different blockchains.
Not like one
exactly.
Universal blockchain, which is part of the debate right now.
And so I think that's the big thing. One of the things I saw in 2022. So if we're looking at like 2022 to 2023, a lot more people are maybe aware or have heard of things like SBF because he's just recently gotten arrested and different things. But there's still it's highlighted, I think, a lot of the ignorance around the blockchain or blockchains or crypto and just all that confusion. So now we're like, it's just going to die.
Well, I'll say there's a reason why NerdWallet and other personal financial websites are thriving and do so well, is because financial literacy is hard in and of itself, and there's always could be more education around financial literacy. So if that's like a current problem outside of blockchain and crypto, and then you put that layer of crypto economics and the blockchain technology on top of that, like, yes, there needs to be more education, and it's going to take a long time for people to kind of understand all of it as well too. So I think we could dive into like what the blockchain is and what crypto is as well, but that could probably be a whole series of episodes.
And we've done several episodes on that already.
Yeah, but I think like when we talk about crypto, we're talking mainly about the tokens that kind of sit on top of different types of blockchains that kind of do the things that are going to be more efficient and transparent and safer for people long term. And I think the tokens end up being sometimes the on-ramp into the blockchain sort of world, whether that be Solana or Ethereum or Bitcoin. And also in this year, what we saw was like NFTs, which are another type of token on Ethereum blockchain or other blockchains, was another gateway for people to kind of get into this blockchain cryptosphere. And it was another type of feeling, another more risky asset than just buying something like Bitcoin. And we're kind of seeing like a lot of money moved into that and a lot of money moved out. But at its core, the blockchain technology that empowers the idea around NFTs, there's still a lot of promise and a lot of things that are not proven out yet that I think we're still pretty like excited about, and think there will be more effective and efficient protocols and businesses that leverage that technology as well too. Wouldn't you agree, TJ?
Oh, I would agree. I think, it's really just a branding problem at this point. Crypto is synonymous with scams, and you see that everywhere. And so it is kind of throw everything away. Crypto's dead, Bitcoin's dead, whatever it is. And the truth is, it's not. There are promising things like Goldfinch.
And even government use cases, like you go to any government institution and try to bring your documentation, like the value of the opportunity and the ability of the blockchain to remove those layers of notaries and county clerk seals on notaries and state seals on county clerk seals on notaries. Like if you've ever adopted a child, which I've done too, it's insane. And the promise of the blockchain to simplify that, just from a government efficiency perspective, that's interesting enough for me.
Yeah, and one of the things that happens in markets like this when everyone says it's dead, and especially this one because it's been brutal for a lot of different reasons.
Let's just say we're down bad.
GM down bad, as Ben Terry likes to say. A lot of people walk away, but the people that do understand that promise and the real world utility, they stay. And that's us. We've been in the space since 2017. We have a strong conviction that this is a better way to provide people access to the economy, because it's decentralized. And right now people are marginalized by some sort of entity.
Yeah.
And so it's promising.
And it's a palate cleanser. Like right now, like what we're able to do is like we are all victim to falling into the hype of anything, but it's especially right now in the crypto world. And this is if Luna was the shot, FTX was the chaser, and now we are. Dude,
is that a Ben Terry original?
I think that might be a Ben Terry original.
I
hope it has not been used yet because that was fire. That was like right off the dome. But we're sobering up and we're basically saying, okay, what was the hype of this past cycle? And now we can look at things soberly of like, what are the actual business models and business plans? And that's not happening just in crypto. That's happening across all early stage VC investing, where people are having to be a lot more sober-minded, doing a lot more diligence because of the lack thereof, and really assessing what is there product market fit? Is there a business model for what this person's trying to do, and not falling victim to hype.
Yeah, and I think obviously we could talk, and we have on multiple podcasts about this, but real quick.
I think that's what the people want is for us to
Well, I
talk.
know, but like for 2023,
Check the stats.
Exactly. Hot take from TJ. 2023. What are you seeing? What are you thinking about with the crypto space? And then Ben, same question to you, specifically Web3, NFTs. Like, what are you concerned about? What are you hoping for? What do you think is going to happen as we look at the next year?
I think generally, it goes back to macro, and I think there still is more pain ahead for the space that's not necessarily driven by the space. What do I hope? I hope that the scandals end. It's been such a highly levered market, and whenever that happens, whether it's in crypto or somewhere else, these things come down. And so my hope is that the contagion ends, and that the promising projects that have utility develop and gain traction.
Ben?
I don't know if I've thought too much about what 2023 is going to be like in this space. But I think in the moment right now, I think what's going to end up happening is I think when there's a winter like this is the time to be going to events and going to meetups, because that's where you're going to meet people who are really committed to building in this space. And so I think like in 2023, if you're like interested in the blockchain, crypto, Web3 world, like attending more events where those people are going to be there, because that's where we found the best startups, the best connections. And I think those people are really passionate about the community, and they're not just like, and like some of the companies in the past that we've invested in started at the bottom, like right now when it's a winter time, like back in 2017, when things were looking grim, like those were a lot of the companies were getting started then. So when people say now's the time to build, I think that is a true statement. And I think we'll see a lot of people who will start building things, us included, within the space that we think hopefully will be promising, who will look at blockchain and crypto. I think right now is the time to look at blockchain and crypto and say, what will actually work, what will actually bring adoption, and what actually has a business model or a plan that can actually generate revenue. Because if you can get mass adoption now in this space, you'll be able to get it when we're back in a good cycle of the market.
So shifting gears, the next hot take is actually for me. So if you guys have questions,
You want us to tee you up?
Yeah, well, it's really around just philanthropy in general. So I think anytime there's a market shift or turmoil in the market like this, philanthropy, and then subsequently the citizens and the individuals that philanthropy serves feel it most acutely, right? And so I think that's one of the things that I think is really lost on a lot of people is the the programs, philanthropy, charitable dollars that go to support communities, in times like this, it actually seemingly can diminish because, the IRS determines, so we're a private operating foundation, which is a weird thing in and of itself, but when they hear foundation, they think, oh, they write grants. So let's just stick with that. So grant writing organizations in communities across the country, the IRS really, for the most part, by and large, mandates that they charitably give away 5% annually. Well, 5% of what? 5% of their revenue? No, it's 5% of their endowment, right? So if they're a $100 million foundation, they are required to report that they have charitably deployed 5% of the $100 million. Well, that endowment fluctuates, right, with the markets. So it goes up, it goes down. Ideally, with foundation leadership, the goal is to continue to grow those assets under management. But in market cycles like this, that's really, really tough. And then what they do is they set budget constraints. So the chief investment officers at the foundation are actually some of the most powerful positions. They will determine, based upon a trailing 3-year outlook on the total assets of the endowment, they will turn to the program officers in that foundation and say, here's your budget.
Wow, TJ, do you feel like you have all that power?
I don't feel powerful at all.
Well, we're
That's
like
a lot
I said,
of power that
like
you
I
just
said,
described.
we're a very different organization. But
Here's your budget, Bryce.
Yeah, but that's how it works. And so then what happens is what people see is community foundation X, pick your community, or big private operating foundation or corporate foundation. Those people that they most often interact with at the homeless shelter, the soup kitchen, whatever the nonprofit charity is that program officer who's been given a budget by the chief investment officer based upon the forecast on the investment endowment performance, looking back over 3 years, forecasting forward. So the markets have a huge impact on philanthropy. And then what that does, if you think about what that breeds in the mindset of these nonprofits, is scarcity. There's very limited dollars to do the work that we're doing. And so when we talk about scarcity versus abundance, and you're thinking, I've got thousands of people I need to serve. How do I do that with scarce resources? And oh, by the way, the markets are down, needs go up, but the availability of capital goes down. So I think that's one of the things that I think people forget in these market cycles. It makes it a very lean time. Now, some foundations will actually stretch. We've seen that in the past where they go over their 5% minimum requirements, but those are the anomalies. Those are few and far between.
But I thought that people were more generous during these times, like not the individuals.
Yeah. And
Is that true? Because I've read a couple articles, but I don't know. I mean, I am less generous right now because money is so tight because of.
And that's a good point, Brian. Like these organizations that the nonprofits we're talking about are supported by foundations, by government institutions, but governments, their revenue come from taxes, and so in these cycles they cut taxes to help citizens. So therefore, there's not as much available in the federal or state coffers to provide to the nonprofits doing the work. So that dollar comes down, which is unknown. And then individuals tighten their own belt strings. Like when inflation's at 9%, but then the basic costs of living, things like housing and food, are outpacing inflation. The average person statistically is not giving more. And so you've got individuals that actually comprise about 80% of charitable contributions to nonprofits. They're tightening their belt straps. Foundations that are impacted greatly by the markets have less to deploy, and governments who provide capital through taxation are cutting taxes or trying to, or to signal a cut. So the funds available to actually help people in need unfortunately diminishes. And that's what I think people don't understand in these market cycles. Mm-hmm. That's the reality that people are experiencing.
So if we were to talk because we're in that world, how in light of those circumstances are we thinking through how does Access as a foundation, private operating foundation, dependent on the market, think through us achieving our mission in light of those things that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, it's a couple of things.
How do we lean in, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, one, we are aggressively and have been since the beginning over on our charitable deployment. Like we never actually we look at it as making sure we're hitting it, but we have a carry forward. And I think, how do we get more organizations that have that mindset of let's just be aggressive? I think what allows us to be more aggressive, though, is because of our mission alignment in our endowment. So the dollars that we have on the investment side, just like we were talking about with ESG or blockchain, those monies are also deployed in ways that are positively impacting our mission. How do we find people trying to generate a profit, but are also thinking about affordable housing, workforce training, better education, a cleaner environment? If we can find fund managers that are aligned with that mission, generating a return, and then we're also then charitably deploying solutions, that to me is kind of how we should be thinking about it. But the problem with philanthropy, and this is the hot take, we continue to see this bifurcation. Investment officers at most, unlike TJ, investment officers at most foundations or family offices are not incentivized to think about this in line. There's misaligned incentives. There's no incentive for them to think about. Their incentive is, how do I maximize return? They're not thinking about how do I maximize return and do so in a way that's in line with our mission. There's just so, and then the power then it lies with the investment committees and these investment officers. And then on the other side, what we continue to see is this bifurcation where the program officers have no look through into what the investments are doing, no ability to speak into that strategy. And so we continue to see this two-pocket kind of super bifurcated approach.
So how does that change then? So what, in a perfect world, Bryce Butler?
Yeah, it comes from accountability, but I think just the will to do it. I think for one,
these are smart people running these things typically.
Unfortunately, in the family office environment, what I've seen is the principal or the high net worth, ultra high net worth family member has a desire to do this, but they succumb to the expertise or the wisdom or the experience of the person managing their investments. I see that all the time, where it's like they walk into the room and they don't, quote unquote, know as much as that investment manager. And so they have these aspirations and desires and dreams, which is kind of what I think were alluding to earlier about that family office. But then they go and talk to their CPA, lawyer, wealth advisor, and they're like, well, that's just not going to work, and so they constantly are combated with, do I press forward? Do I have the will to actually say, no, we're doing this? This is actually my money and we're going to do it anyways? Or do they just kind of succumb to, well, they know better and we'll think about it?
Well, I do think that the intellect of a CIO can be pretty, it can set somebody on their back foot. So
sure, well, because you want to hire someone that has a track record, has the pedigree, understands the markets.
Like me. So I can be intimidating when I come in and say, Bryce, we can't do that.
Correct.
And Bryce has a will. No, there's also this there's also the, the fiduciary duty
Correct.
that these folks have. And so they may feel like they can't take the risks.
Mm-hmm.
And so their job when they're with the principal, or the family member, and they're advising them from that fiduciary position because they're on the hook there, and they can say, "Hey, Bryce, this is actually too risky. It breaks the IPS, blah blah blah." And these are all obstacles that you have to get over, Bryce, to say, "No, it's my money. I'm going to do it."
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that's where you have to Brian, your question, you got to go back. Be willing to amend your investment policy statements. I do think there is some federal regulation, and specifically like the nonprofit sector foundations. The guidelines have really not been amended much since the 1960s. They're kind of set in place. Nobody's really questioned it. Truth be told, you question it, you kind of sticking your neck out there for scrutiny. So a lot of people that are trying to do things differently try to just do it incrementally and pursue kind of incremental change, which I think is good. But I do think there is some more aggressive and radical review and analysis of how should we be thinking about these things? Why are these public institutions, these university endowments, so large and continue to grow, and yet the cost of education to the average person, which is what we talk about all the time, student debt, how do we actually match those two things up? And I think that's a massive kind of government question that hasn't been addressed since the 1960s. So there is that, the will, review of investment policies, understanding what is the fiduciary responsibility, being willing to kind of walk in and listen and learn with your wealth advisor.
So do you two you and TJ have a, differences over how things are being done?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Defined us.
Yeah. Well, I sense that when I'm in the room. I just was going to ask.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the reality. It's like, but
you're pretty strong on the direct, like where you want it to go.
Yes.
And
so the will to do it, but the will to listen and to say, okay, how do we do this, soberly?
And does he listen?
Does Bryce listen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes. No, he does. By and large, he listens.
But the great thing is, too, there's the investment committee, there's the board, there's Bryce, there's TJ. There's a lot of folks able to ask questions and speak into it. And I think that's ultimately what has to occur. And oftentimes what you see, there's not a level of thoughtfulness. So if a lot of larger group, like there's a massive board, and then there's a subcommittee that's the investment committee, that's a subcommittee of the board. And so I think there's a lack of understanding around who has what authority and power, and an unwillingness to kind of question like the right role in those conversations. I think it's because we started this way too. Like Access Ventures is 9 years old. I started it kind of with this idea in mind. We can move a lot more nimbly than a massive historic organization that's been doing it for 50 years. So it's kind of like the analogy I use is we are in a small little dinghy sailboat. We can move and maneuver a lot faster than a massive ocean liner. Their changes to move have to be very incremental over a longer period of time. And so that's that kind of old foundation, and we're kind of this new, nimble.
But so there's no way for a massive ship to change. It's never going to become
I think it's kind of twofold. I think it's incremental through kind of being willing to take some measured risks. And then I do think it's at some point, how do we have a collective conversation around what is the right policy, right regulation that needs to amend to kind of force some of that change? How do we hold investment officers accountable? Where right now, if you think about like, if the investment officer or outside manager is evaluated on the performance financially of the portfolio, everything's good, right? I mean, everything's always up and to the right in a sense, right? Because they can choose safe investments. They're not incentivized to take risks. They're not incentivized to think creatively. In fact, they are fired if something doesn't, you know what I mean? So it's like, maintaining the status quo is the name of the game. And so you have to think through incremental shifts that help people get comfortable with change, and then massive, larger kind of regulation or policy changes that hold people accountable to thinking differently. So, okay, final shift, big question. And Brian, this is going to bring you into it a lot more. So
I'm super excited.
And who's Brian McKay?
Yeah, exactly.
So Brian is our Chief Community Officer at Access Ventures, and he's been on our board before. I think
the key member of the board, but anyway,
that's true. That's true. Brian's secret sauce, and I think some of you might resonate with this who are listening. The value of kind of creating and maintaining and growing relationships is very squishy. It's a qualitative value, and when you're talking about investments or whatever, that we want to, how do we measure that, like quantitatively? And so what Brian is a super connector. He understands people. He cares about people. I think in a way that a lot of others don't even think about relationships, and you just do it so naturally.
That's true. It's very natural.
But I think that's the hard thing. It's like, so what do you do? Is a lot of times the question you get, like, but here's the thing. You've been in investments. You've sold investments. You know kind of how they operate. But at the end of the day, some people are always like, so Brian, what do you do? You work at this family office, or you work at Access Ventures. Like, what's your job? Like, yeah. So talk to what is your job?
Well, I've got a lot of jobs, but I just think when you talk about investments or different things, so I really, at a young age, realized my gifting was just relationship. And so I have sold billions of dollars of investments and really through relationship, because I would build trust with a person, and then I would have trust from, the fund manager, and I would take them into a room and two people would start talking and amazing things would happen. But it really comes down to being authentic on both sides. Like, I genuinely cared about the broker. I genuinely cared about, whoever the fund manager was. And So like, again, my wife, and I wish she was here to say this, but sexy and smart is the word she uses for me, but you didn't use those. But where I really did realize that I wasn't the smartest guy in the room, but I genuinely cared about people. And there's people I generally don't care about too, just want to make that clear. But if I do care about you, I really do, and I'm all in on that. And so when people ask me what I do, I hate the word, like, people will say like pastoring or different things like that. I don't know, it sounds cheesy, but there is an essence of just caring for people's souls. And when I say that, not necessarily spiritual, but also just their well-being, like their whole person. And so, at Access Ventures, we constantly are talking about the whole person. And, I really look at it and go, I just want to see people be better humans. I want to see people just like I can point to people that I've spent time with and other people have that years later they're a better human, and I feel like I have a small part of that, but they've also made me better too. I mean, some cases they haven't. I've really done most of the work, but
well, I think the other thing that you are, whether you like them or not, you have a disarming personality,
right?
And so
but some people find it offensive,
but I think at the end of the day,
the waiter last night found it offensive, but I won him over by the end.
But you won him over.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. It's endearing. Like it can be like a little off-putting, but
I've never heard that before. But okay.
But I think the power of relationships, and I think we've been friends for a long time on my board, but now working on the team, it was really important to me that you come and work with us, mostly because I think one of the fundamental beliefs that we've always had, so we do a lot of things. We've talked about crypto, we've talked about our endowment, we've talked about philanthropy. We fundamentally believe that at the heart of any transformative change in a company, community, or culture is people. And if we're going to really affect long-term positive outcomes in a community that provides better flourishing, more inclusive and creative economies, whatever the language you want to use, it's going to be people kind of charting that course, leading that company, managing those people, making decisions, investing in companies as a fund manager. And so at the heart of all of those things is people. And so I think what I think you understand, and I think oftentimes is hard for people to really grasp, is like you get people because you love people. So I'm curious where, I know I personally know your backstory, where you were born and raised and all those different things. Where do you think that kind of came from? Do you have an idea of, like, was there a influence in your life, or is it just something have you been that guy?
Well, so I've always been that. I mean, so I was the class speaker, and it wasn't because I was valedictorian, surprisingly, but it was that thing. I just remember our class voted, and it was the first time that they just said, we want you to speak. Now, they wanted me to be funny and inappropriate and all those things, which I kind of was, but kind of wasn't. But it was probably when I started working at the bank selling investments that I started realizing the power of relationship and genuine relationship. And so everything you just described, I mean, it's like, the team here or the leadership experience people or whatever I'm working in, there's just a genuine care for the people and to understand where they're at. And in that, beautiful things happen. And so it's easy for me to, if I need something for TJ, even if it's an uncomfortable conversation, if he knows that I'm for him, it's an easy conversation for me. I mean, and so I just really look at it going, like, everything begins with people and ends with people, and decisions, or, it's even the markets and everything. And so I just am a firm believer in going, if you understand the people in the room and generally care about their well-being, so it can't be giving something to get something. We talk about that all the time, going, you can't want something from someone, but you can get something from someone, but it's got to be, there has to be a genuine care for them. So,
well, and I think you've probably refined your approach over time. But
and the thing I laugh at is going, so I have watched you now working with you and those things, I mean, for years, but where I really go, part of your secret sauce is going, you really care about people. And like, it's whether it's your investments or, it's your employees or whatever, I just go, I see you constantly caring about, their well-being, even beyond your own. And, you have a tough exterior, nobody likes you, but I'm saying deep down, you're an amazing person. And so that's why I just laugh. Like, I feel like, joining the team here. I mean, I feel like, yes, if let's just say if the dinghy's going down, we're throwing other people off before me because my role is probably more important. But I really go, what I love working with you guys is I feel like we all have a genuine care for people.
Yeah.
And so, but it's real because I've watched you in bad situations still care for people. So
I think
you can say something nice about me now.
Well, no, let me jump in because I want to like give. You're right, Bryce, tough exterior, nice guy. He gave us Christmas Eve off. Can you believe that?
Yeah, amazing.
I mean, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, please, sir, may I have some more? Yeah,
humbug.
Please. Well, in sense of like caring for people, Brian and Bryce, you both work a lot with emerging managers, leaders of organizations. You do a lot of like coaching with them and talking with them. What do you think in 2023 are going to be some of the biggest needs, and or like how are you all thinking about pouring into leaders in 2023? Like, what do you think are some of the trends that you're seeing of like stuff people need help with or should be on watch for, or hope people develop this more in 2023?
That's a good question. I'm curious what Brian says, and I kind of couple on that. You talked about trust, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around how trust is built. So if you could think about that, I think for me, as I think about 2023, there's a seminal work in the 1990s by Dr. Putnam, Bowling Alone.
Like bowling, like at
bowling, like literally
bowling
like going
alley?
to the bowling alley and bowling alone. And he looks at the data and talks about just the decline of friendships and the importance of friendships. And when you think about our modern
a guy
culture,
who goes bowling alone, I would assume doesn't
Exactly.
have friends.
It's like going to movies alone. It's the same thing.
But it was the first time there was a significant study done on the impact of friendship. And so when you think about like the last 3-4 years, from COVID isolation to the racial unrest to now trying to navigate a post-COVID world and what that looks like and families. But even before that, with Bowling Alone, people were already lonely. Friendship for most men and women in America is on the decline. They don't feel connected. They don't feel known. Suicides are up. Mental health is insanely a horrible experience for many people. And so I think for me, as I look at 2023, people desperately crave connection. And that's when I think about like our team or the companies we work with, I always want to, how do we connect people at a human level, where there's fun and recreation and we just talk with no agenda. So I think that's something for me that's interesting. I think and then the other thing I was going to say was, I've used this analogy as I've kind of thought about the next season of what I want to think about is people have never questioned investing in a scholarship fund for higher education, because we know if somebody goes to college, it's going to return dividends to them and their families and their communities because of their ability to earn their earning potential and all these different things that education affords. But to me, that's great and I think important, but it's an intellectual investment in the future of a human. What does it look like to actually invest in the spiritual, physical, emotional, intellectual, but also relational well-being? So that's kind of what Brian was alluding to with the kind of this whole person idea. Like what would it look like to have a program or a scholarship fund or a fellowship where that was the focus? And that ultimately, if our belief is people are at the heart of any transformative change in communities, companies, and cultures, that if we do that over a longer period of time, that's going to have unbelievable ripple effects in the future. So that's kind of where I'm thinking about with 2023. I mean, I don't know, Brian, if
I was just going to say, because we get to work with great individuals, but where I'm hyper aware that with the economy tanking like it is, that people aren't doing well. And I don't know why I always think of TJ, but where just that whole conversation of going, like, how are you really doing? Because he said that. Because for me, it's that thing going, I do love getting together, and I think Bryce and I will always tell people, the more time you spend doing nothing with each other, the better friendships you have. But I do think there's moments, like especially in this economy, to ask the question of how are you really doing? Because most A-type driven people, they're not going to tell you how they're really doing. They're going to, put their best face on and act like everything's okay, even though they're terrified of funding or other things like that. And so to just listen, and what I realize is I might not be able to help them, but at least I can listen. And then I'm just grateful for the network that we have of sometimes we are able to help people and, or at least point them in the right direction. But I just think because, when you talked about COVID, I think COVID, the social injustice, the election with Trump, all those other things, that was one of the most stressful times I've ever been in, just emotionally. And I had my parents living with me at the time, and that was the worst of it all. But where I think we're in those times again of going, COVID is still
with us.
Yeah, still with us. And then you
is he in the room right now?
Well,
do you see him?
But I just think just being aware that everyone feels alone, or they don't want to be a burden, or they want to pretend like everything's okay. But when people ask my secret sauce, it's been that of just really finding out how are they really doing and not judging them. In my head, I'm judging them. Just I don't judge them when I'm talking to them. Yeah, verbally. Yeah.
As always, thanks for listening, and stay up to date by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, drop us a review so others can find us as well. More Than Profit is a production of Access Ventures. Direction, design, and editing is done by our friends at Render, a public benefit innovation studio in Louisville, Kentucky. To learn more about their work, check out workwithrender.com. As always, I'm Bryce Butler with Access Ventures. Thanks for listening.